Lancelot was being killed. Malagant, whose arms rippled with muscles, it's said in one of the books, was hammering downward with his sword. Sidebar, it says exactly that his legs, arms, and feet rippled with muscles. Basically, I'm picturing The Rock with more muscular feet. Even if he didn't tower over Lancelot, the deep cuts in Lancelot's hands and feet were not helping. They were both in full armor, but the sword had gotten around it from time to time and made small yet painful cuts. Lancelot's white armor was red, and he was going to fall soon. He would die here, in service of his queen. Then he heard his name. The name that no one knew except him, and it was a woman's voice. He turned around and saw the woman he loved at the window. It was Guinevere. She was calling to him. Sidebar, we aren't told how she knows his name, but let's just pretend the monk who was with him when he lifted the slab saw the name and blabbed it to everyone so we can just kind of move on and not have to deal with it. Back to the fight. In Lancelot's moment of distraction, he took a hard hit on the shoulder from Malagant's sword and went down, but it didn't matter. As a listener, I've largely spared you from pages and pages of talk about the love Lancelot has for Guinevere, with love always being capitalized, about how it gives him strength and power and hope and honor and blah. It's probably the worst part about the writing of Creation de Troyes. That and the stories never seem to finish. Anyway, here's one of those instances where it actually fits pretty well with the story. Lancelot saw Guinevere, so not only does he know she's watching, but now he has a reason. He can do this. He stood and faced Malagant. Lancelot began hacking at his opponent, and it was difficult at first, but Guinevere yelling in support made all the difference. Slowly, he was able to turn Malagant until the very muscular knight had his back to Guinevere, and Lancelot could see her. The young knight, in formerly white armor, gripped his sword, reopening the cuts in his hand. But he was like a man possessed. He blocked Malagant's attacks almost before they happened, and in moments he had cut the knight in all the right places. Malagant was flagging, and soon he dropped. Lancelot had only to finish him. Then he heard Guinevere yelling that he should spare the knight, that he should stop fighting. Of course, it was all King Badamagu's doing. He didn't want either to die, and he liked Guinevere and disapproved of his son kidnapping her. He knew that seeing Guinevere would give Lancelot strength, and so he rushed the queen to the window at the last moment. He was hoping for a draw, though, and had to backpedal a bit when Lancelot almost killed his son. He got Guinevere to convince Lancelot to spare the boy, and now everything would be okay. Except that he saw his son stand to his feet and kick Lancelot in the chest. When the young man went down, Malagant stood over him, striking him repeatedly with his sword and kicking him in the ribs. Lancelot blocked as best he could, but he didn't hit back. Guinevere, his queen, had told him not to, and he was her knight. King Badamagu told his son to seriously stop it. I imagine a fairly awkward interchange took place, where the king and his son argued in front of the assembled knights and ladies, who just wanted to watch two grown men hack each other to death. At the end of it, Malagant decided that he wouldn't win this thing if Lancelot actually fought back. He agreed to let Guinevere leave, under the condition that they fight again, 1 year from today, at Camelot. If Lancelot failed then Malagant could take Guinevere, and no one would ever be able to come after her again. Everyone agreed that this was a good idea. Everyone except Guinevere, of course, because who cares what she, the person who would be taken, thought about that. The king agreed to release the remaining captives, with good guy Badamagu not really addressing why they were there to begin with. Lancelot thanked the king when the older man made his way out to the battlefield. The king himself helped Lancelot to his feet and directed him inside. After all this time, Lancelot was going to see the woman he loved. He was going to talk to the queen. He saw her approach from a distance, and it took his breath away. Hers was the face he saw in his dreams. When things were hard on the trip here, or when he was tempted to stop, he only had to remember their scant few conversations to spur him onward. Now he had rescued her. He would get to see her. She walked toward him and passed him with an eye roll. She entered her room, and Lancelot heard the door lock behind her. He was then informed by one of her ladies that she had no desire to talk to him. Lancelot was hurt and annoyed and really confused. He figured that she and the other captives would have to return to Camelot with him, so she couldn't stay in her room forever. Then he learned that they would not be leaving for Camelot right away, because Gawain hadn't showed up yet. Gawain, who took the very inaccurately named Underwater Bridge, still hadn't arrived, and the queen refused to leave without the famous knight. Lancelot stayed a couple of days and healed a bit before setting out to look for Gawain. He was thoroughly confused and distracted about Guinevere when he left, and that could have been why he didn't take any armor, or weapons, or other knights. King Badamagu told Lancelot that he could travel safely in the king's lands, but the king didn't happen to tell anyone else in his lands, at least not right away. Lancelot was captured a couple days out in his search for Gawain, and the message got a little garbled on its way back to King Badamagu, in basically a medieval game of telephone. The king learned that Lancelot was dead, Purple Monkey Dishwasher. Guinevere took it hard. Snubbing him had been a joke. Kind of. She had heard about him in the cart, about how it took 2 extra steps for him to climb aboard and take on that terrible shame in order to come find her. She was just going to give him a hard time about it, but he left so quickly seeking for Gawain that she didn't get to tell him that it was just a joke. I get the joke, but maybe, I don't know, wait until his wounds heal from battle in which he was fighting for your freedom, or until they scab over. It was really poorly timed, and now he was dead. Guinevere stopped eating. It got so bad that she refused to get out of bed. That young man had died, and he didn't know how grateful she was. She cared for him, too. Out of all the knights on King Arthur's court, he was the only one to show up here, the only one to fight for her freedom, and now he was gone. And he had left so soon because of her. She almost wanted to die herself. Meanwhile, the people who had captured Lancelot were bringing him, proudly, back to the king. A few days later, they arrived with Lancelot in chains. They were promptly executed for not following an order they didn't know about, and Lancelot was released. Lancelot, though, was angry. He had days in solitude to think about the queen, and now he had to know why she had refused to talk to him the last time he was here. He didn't wait for her to find him or send him a servant. He had to know right now. Still in the clothes he had been wearing for days, he went straight to her room. Her servants were there when Lancelot stormed in, and she forced them out to the anteroom, where Kay was recovering. Real quickly, Kay had been beaten pretty badly by Malagant, and taken captive too, so he's been just lying in bed the whole time, trying to keep conscious and not bleed to death, while medieval medicine works its magic. When Lancelot stormed in, he had expected the queen to be angry with his impudence, but she hadn't even heard he was still alive. She rushed to the knight and embraced him. Actually holding Guinevere, the woman he had loved from a distance for a year, in his arms, Lancelot's mood changed. When she realized the servants could see, Guinevere stepped back to an appropriate distance and told Lancelot that she was happy he was alive. He had inquired about the snub, and she told him that it was just a stupid joke and apologized. He apologized about taking 2 extra steps before getting into the cart, and they were reconciled. They sat and talked, and he told her all about the journey he had undertaken to rescue her, and she had seen his fight with Malagant. They were getting along great, and then Lancelot thought that he was maybe too bold in saying this, but he didn't care. He had almost died twice for her. He looked to the door and the servants waiting just beyond, and asked if there was anywhere more private they could speak. He saw a smirk creep onto the queen's face. "Private," she said. "We're nearly in my bedroom." "Nearly," she whispered. It was barely audible to Lancelot, and the servants at the door couldn't hear it at all. Guinevere turned and looked at the window. There were thin iron bars on it, and she remarked, still in a whisper, about how great the view of the orchard was. Her door was locked at night, of course, but some nights she would just look out at the orchard all night, and if there happened to be anyone outside of her window, she could talk to them through the bars. This person would have to be quiet and discreet and careful that no one saw him, and Guinevere remarked how she always had to be quiet at night, because Kay slept in the connecting room. He had insisted on it to watch over his queen. Of course, he was still recovering from his fight when Guinevere had been taken, so he was bedridden and wouldn't be barging in or anything like that. Then, without warning, she began talking loudly again, and informed the good knight that she appreciated his service and they would wait until Gawain returned to leave for Camelot. She summoned a servant to let Sir Lancelot, is it, out of the room. Good day. Lancelot's head was swimming as he sat around in eager excitement, waiting for nighttime.